Okay folks, so over the last couple of weeks, most of you have probably become aware of the current hostile takeover of Evergreen State College by a variety of student groups and students in general, acting out in rage over the simple and obviously heinous fact that white faculty member Brett Weinstein had the fucking brazen audacity to set his filthy pale feet on campus during the college's annual day of absence. I've been out of town lately a lot, guys, and I want to apologize for my less than frequent production of content. Anyway, that nonsense aside, as some of you may be aware, I have a bit of a unique perspective on topics that address or assess the state of the ivory tower and the academy, being somewhat of an insider in some sense, and moreover someone with a vested interest in seeing the institution maintain some semblance of its integrity and value, which it has more or less thoroughly lost. So today I'm going to give my 2 cents on the incidences at Evergreen, how the university and its cultural climate came to exist in this sorry state, and how Evergreen can be seen as emblematic of the future of all institutions if the faculty and the staff and the institutions at large continue to placate, if not outright, and they do outright do it, encourage the absurd movement of treating the university as an adult daycare for functional toddlers, of the faculty to serve as substantive parents, of the students to be children incapable of any extent of self-awareness or personal responsibility. Evergreen, in its relatively short but storied history of socialist propagandizing, social justice, and critical cultural-oriented education programs, and ultimately through its student-directed, with implicit if not explicit support of faculty, support and dissemination of extremist Marxist and anarchist propaganda, it has destroyed itself, and it has destroyed any reputation it may have once held. But most egregiously, Evergreen has destroyed the minds of its students, if they in fact had any to begin with. Quickly, because I believe most of you are familiar with it, let's cover what the fresh fuck happened at Evergreen to lead to its continual coverage across the skeptic community. Let me start with the triggering, both literally and figuratively, event, which occurred on April 12th of 2017, wherein Evergreen held their annual day of absence. And as such, depending on who you ask, white students and faculty were either required or requested to not attend courses nor teach. The history of this event is based on a play of the same name by Douglas Turner Ward, wherein quite the opposite occurs, as it is instead black people who suddenly disappear from a community to emphasize their importance to said community. As such, historically, Evergreen, every year up into this most recent one, has held the day of absence as a voluntary action by black students to go off campus to teach and learn. Stupid and pointless, yes, but harming absolutely no one, and therefore of no concern for me. This year, however, student organizations and the University Equity Council, formed by relatively new college president George Bridges, who has made himself like an actual bigger beta cuck than James Comey over the last few weeks, flipped the switch on the day of absence this last year, seemingly requiring the opposite be imposed. That is in order to show just how important black people are to a community, as the play it is in reference to implies, they decided instead that they should just ban all whites from campus for a day. Yeah, that makes a whole hell of a lot of sense, sure. A bit weird that they seem to be incapable of understanding their own metaphors.
Come on, Mr. Man.
Don't you have a business to run?
Business? Can't have no business without no niggers.
What are we gonna do, Henry?
Please, Rob.
What are we gonna do?
Listen, this is what we're gonna do, alright?
But we'll get into just why and how these kids are so fucking hopelessly stupid soon enough. During this most recent day of absence, Professor of Biology Brett Weinstein refused to cancel his classes and instead remained on campus after sending a very sensible email to the faculty who instituted this revised day of absence concerning his objections about the removal of a type of person from the academy, even if for a single day, involuntarily, based on the color of their skin. If the name Weinstein didn't already tip you off, Brett is a Jew, and despite his allegories to the Holocaust in his letter about the physical removal of individuals, somehow he didn't manage to garner any privilege points in this exchange. Now, here's a little interesting bit. Did you notice how this event itself occurred in April, yet I am talking about it here now in June? Everyone is talking about it here in late May and June. That is because the outrage over his appearance on campus took almost an entire month to be noticed. Artificial outrage, anyone? anyone. Or perhaps this is a revolt organized by an outside institution that encouraged these, excuse my microaggressions, intellectual children to engage in this illogical and violent behavior. Huh? I mean, when you look at these clips, this presents as a tribalistic intergroup outrage. You are not one of us, therefore you are subhuman, right? And of course, along with that, there is no way that this outrage could not be manufactured, that this could not have been brought about by the faculty or from some outside influence to these young people. No. This is obviously organic. Dr. Weinstein has subsequently made the rounds on various media outlets, including the likes of Joe Rogan, to explain not only why he chose to do his job during what he believed was a voluntary activity, but also how he has been attacked and harassed by students, how his students have been attacked and harassed. To the point wherein the police were told by university officials, by the president of the university, to stand down, to not defend Dr. Weinstein, were he to be attacked by students, as they were looking for him and going through cars trying to find, quote, an individual. And despite the fact that he has not yet lost his job, his position itself does in fact hang in a tenuous balance, as students continue to scream and cry for his removal, all over the fact that he physically showed up on campus. All of this outrage, all of it began because Weinstein had the audacity to exist while white on Evergreen's campus. A heinous crime, I know. Since then, the students, a motley group of baseball bat-wielding non-binary twinks, morbidly obese otherkin, and most of all, the now iconic and infamous R2 Didn't Do, have been patrolling the campus to deal out social justice in the form of mostly limp-wristed attacks upon innocent Limp Bizkit fans. Fuck Green Day, by the way. Meanwhile, in the school itself, students were caught on camera screaming at professors, screaming at them, calling them racist, screaming at them for simply being on campus even after the day of absence itself, screaming at them for attempting to teach, claiming they were all racist and would have to go, as well as openly screeching at the president of the college himself, who cowered in fear at their incomprehensible and senseless rage. A scene which these self-same students have hysterically claimed was edited by the nebulous, evil, vile entity known as the alt-right, which they edited to, quote, make them look bad.
Hello?
Ooh, yeah, sure. Well, we'll get into why these kids are incapable of taking personal responsibility for their own behavior, namely that they have never been asked any such thing, and more interestingly, have actually been actively encouraged to, in fact, do quite the opposite. We will get into that. Let's move on, though. And while currently, the mainstream media is more preoccupied with a single violent threat that was called in several days ago that has kept the university on lockdown, even forcing graduation to be held off campus, an act which of course was abhorrent and not the right way to respond to this absurd display, no matter how repugnant it may be, the problem at Evergreen is not white supremacy, nor is it violence coming from the outside, nor is it Nazis or whatever pathetic narrative is being woven, but rather the problem is that Evergreen is nothing short of a daycare, and the infants it cares for are throwing a massive temper tantrum, spurred by the Marxist and anarchist rhetoric taught by their very caretakers and fellow students. And what a fucking tantrum it was. When Evergreen finally reopened its doors after several days of being closed, the students had destroyed the place, causing approximately $10,000 in property damage. And over what? Because a Jew had the audacity to say physically removing people from an environment because of some inexorable physiological quality of the self was just a teensy bit fashy. Huh? Weird, right? And just who are these caretakers? Well, Dr. Weinstein is himself certainly among them. Despite being a professor of biology and appearing rational on Joe Rogan's podcast, Weinstein and the faculty around him that he has worked with day in and day out are at least in part responsible for this current crisis, which is in fact a melting pot of various social and political puzzle pieces of insanity. While I have described the destructive nature of cultural Marxism and critical theory in the academy in the past, how it lies in aberrant rot in contrast to the procedural individual, empirical nature of the sciences, Evergreen provides a greater exemplar of the takeover of the institution of the academy than any previous example that I could think of. Professors like Dr. Weinstein have chosen to teach at Evergreen for numerous reasons, including the unique full-time educational system the university offers in difference to all other institutions in the United States, allowing students to work one-on-one a year at a time with a single instructor to whom all pedagogical outcomes are deferred to from the institution. That is, professors like Dr. Weinstein maintain a small collective of students for a year of education, working one-on-one to ensure that even I would consider to be one of the most individualized and advanced educational programs in the country. And while that may sound fantastic on the outset, it is also part and parcel, to quote Sadiq Khan, contributing to the current social temperature at Evergreen. While Dr. Weinstein may serve as an excellent professor in the field of biology, let us instead consider a similar outlook for a student in a postmodern field, such as feminist theory or race scholarship. You are looking at an intense, year-long session of indoctrination, led by a cult-like demagogue, towards whom the students not only pay homage through the ritual completion of work intended to indoctrinate them into the cult of social justice and leftism, but who have been, through the new mandates of the faculty equity councils, called by the president himself, have been allowed to totally change the organization of the university to fit a cultural Marxist narrative in line with the demands of various anarchist organizations that have not only been allowed but openly welcomed on campus since its inception, as in an ongoing attempt for the institution to signal its own leftist virtue. And by that I mean this: according to Dr. Weinstein, the current president, George Bridges, who can easily be seen cowering in front of a gaggle of adult children as they publicly castigate him for being white and even held him hostage had he want to try and take a piss, Bridges has made a massive push in the faculty towards diversity and equity, both in hires and throughout the school programs, all without empirical support for the benefit of such a decision. Again, this is why I despise critical cultural scholars who base everything on feelings and relativity. If you cannot illustrate why your new system will be beneficial, then there is no logical reason to adopt it. But alas, that is the mental disease known as leftism. They believe there is no such thing as an objective reality. They are inevitably all relativists, as is required by their lunatic political ideology, which they are now forcefully and militantly attempting to utilize to destroy this institution of supposed higher learning, regardless of how cucked it was inherently, all to fit the cultural Marxist narrative. And just where does this narrative come from, Aiden, you ask? Well, I think you know full well, but under this cultural Marxist narrative, which even Weinstein himself is not without question for, despite the demonization he has faced, considering that he calls himself a social justice advocate. You know, I'm imagining he did so back when that term made sense beyond just prostrating oneself onto another race for the crime of being white. But what we really must look at here is further into the Evergreen system as an institution of higher education. Evergreen was founded as a liberal arts institution in 1971, and from the outset was designed to create these types of functional toddlers that it has, whoa, what a surprise, ultimately created. According to their own history page, the school was designed to move beyond grades and focus instead on, quote, constructive feedback through narrative evaluations. Yes, that means that students at Evergreen do not get letter grades, but rather receive evaluations that they both write for themselves and receive from their instructors. Despite a statement on their website that master's programs will still frequently accept these evaluations in lieu of a GPA, well, I would be a bit suspect about what type of master's program and institutions would be willing to do so. But hey, that's just me. What do I know about academia? And speaking of acceptance into college programs, let's take a look at the acceptance rate for Evergreen. It is 98.9%. Well, that, really makes me wonder what kind of trait an individual must possess to make up the 1% that's not accepted. Being too white, probably. Anyway, since its establishment, Evergreen has had a long and storied history of civil rights activism. The difference being, of course, that in 1971 there were perhaps some real issues of race and gender equality that these students had a reason to be upset about. But now they have fucking nothing. The point is, Evergreen has always been a den of lefties. There'll be a link in the description if you care for some reason to read about that history, but I'm not going to go into it. Now, let's take a look into Evergreen today and take a little peek into what kinds of degrees and courses are offered at this institution of supposed higher learning. Look at that. It's just a parody. This can't be real. Oh no, wait, no, hang on. No. I have to look at my own field here, don't I? Oh, I don't want to click on this. Communication. Oh, shit! East and West Sanskrit and Greek Dance Theater. In my department, it's more retarded than you'd think. Now, in Evergreen's defense, it is an extremely affordable college even for a state school. Yes, it is a state school, and keep that in mind for the entirety of this video, meaning that the tax dollars of the citizens of
Washington, I said Oregon like a stupid asshole. Then again, what's the difference?
go towards propping this place up. But yes, with a tuition of $6,500 a year for in-state students, that cost is significantly lower than the national average for a public four-year institution. Although I must note that College Factual states that the average cost to attend Evergreen is $28,000 a year. So who knows? I'm just trying to do my due diligence. But presuming it is the lower number, I guess you do in fact get the bang for your buck. If, by bang you mean a pointless waste of 4 years, $26,000 in debt at the least, and likely most of your brain cells. And I say that because I can't imagine too many job openings are out there waiting in the wings for someone with a degree in consciousness studies from a university that accepts anyone with a pulse and doesn't deal in any form of standardized measurement of success or excellence. I mean, really, what kind of employee can you generally, of course not always, Evergreen has had its share of notable alumni, including Simpsons creator Matt Groening, but what kind of person would you imagine? Now, before I explain what kind of person based on evidence drawn from developmental psychology, what kind of person would you imagine the average Evergreen student to be? A hard worker? You think? I do want to point out that I attempted to find some data on the average time between completing a degree at Evergreen and finding permanent employ. However, the best I could find was the average salary, which was listed at $39,000 a year, and that number is about the average for any liberal arts program in the United States. So take that as you will. I don't know how long it takes you to find a job, or if most of them even do find employ. But for those of them who do, they tend to make the same amount of money, at least according to the online resources I can locate, as most colleges in the United States. Given what I've just described to you about how Evergreen works, you may have some idea about why it's facing, some of these issues. But these issues are not entirely unique to Evergreen, as I have intimated in the past in previous videos. As it stands, the current state of the Ivory Tower is an adult daycare for functional toddlers, given that, in contrast, the state of public education, at least currently in the United States, has been devastatingly altered by the introduction of excessive government programs, institution of programs such as No Child Left Behind, particularly for inner-city school systems to push forward unqualified, uneducated, and often frankly illiterate children through high school, and then haphazardly and woefully, if not criminally, push them ill-prepared into the academy. Now, perhaps they are prepared for an institution like Evergreen, but in general, no. For a more thorough analysis of the state of public schooling in the United States, see Charles Sykes' book Dumbing Down Our Kids, which is a pop political piece easily accessible and frankly prophetic. Anyway, the children who have never been forced to achieve, who have never been beholden to any standard of excellence or even criticism, are suddenly thrust upon the university system, wherein the ivory tower becomes the subjugate father figure in typical Marxist rhetoric to replace the family with the state, or in this instance, with the academy. Let us then assess and analyze the psychology of the average Evergreen freshman, who, as I have explicated, is held to no standards of admittance to a university with a 99% acceptance rate, and with no standardized grading system. Well, can't say that anything about the university on the surface would offer much help to students straight out of high school, unused to accountability, but I don't want to totally discount them. I want instead to start on a little bit of an aside about developmental psychology, and what stage of development, beyond being, again, completely ill-prepared to enter an environment of higher learning after graduating from a typical American public school system, these freshmen are in. Beginning with the earliest stages of development, looking to Piaget as a basis of developmental psychology. In the more formative stages of child development, the child lacks capacity on a cognitive basis given the limitations of brain development to experience the emotion of empathy and to differentiate, while sympathy describes feeling for a person. That is, you feel sad, and as such, I understand the concept that you are sad. Whereas with empathy, you feel sad, and I understand and feel the concept of sadness with you, not for you, but with you, because I have also experienced sadness. I understand your struggle because I have also struggled.
And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich?
The experience of empathy increases in children as they exit the pre-operational stage of development. However, there is an interesting phenomena that begins with the induction of the child into adolescence that, in contrast, lead to a decrease in the experience of empathy. That is, the adolescent mind is subject to various psychological defects, such as adolescent egocentrism, and subsequent sub-effects such as the invisible audience effect. That is, there is a perception among adolescents that the entire world is a stage, to quote the Bard himself, and that the eyes of said stage are focused solely upon the protagonist of its story. That is, the teenager. She or he is the center of all adulation, all criticism, even when none is extant, all attention. That is adolescent egocentrism. It is difficult to separate the self from society, as they tend to view social interaction as a performance of the self. As Jung would have suggested, the formation of the sense of the self is in contrast to that which it is not, the performance of the identity, of what Cooley calls the looking glass self. That is, the self as perceived by the other in different instances. The self as a performance, moreover, of something additionally called face work, as described further by Goffman. That is, the self as being defined by the groups we inhabit, by who we are associating with, by who we are interacting with, how we are seen by others through the looking glass. And as an extension of this, how we can define our personal perception of the self, not just as Jung described it, as differentiation, but also as association. Goffman added the perception of the self as not only an individual concept, but as intrinsically and inexorably a part of the social function of human behavior. Why the fuck am I giving you this basic lesson on the history of research on the development of the concept of the self? Well, because the students at universities such as Evergreen have never been associated or introduced to the kind of socially critical concepts as described by Cooley through the looking glass self, or more thoroughly through the navigation of face work and social situations, winding up instead in a bizarre self that is centered on social identity rather than personal identity. Given the delayed adolescent behavior coming from a high school system wherein there is no concept of egalitarianism nor meritocracy, wherein facts or concepts are disregarded to force students ahead. Therefore, is it any surprise that the students of Evergreen have no ability to conceptualize the idea of ever having to do hard work, resulting in positive outcomes? No, they have no idea how to associate hard work with positive outcomes. And moreover, they have no sense of the self, because they have never had to assess the self in contrast or in construct with others outside of a group identity. Group identity that is race, sex, or other factors. With no permanent concept of the unique selfness, only social labels to define the sense of the self, with no emphasis on selfhood, self-improvement, growth, work, or merit, the student becomes trapped in a permanent state of childhood, of adolescence, of adolescent egocentrism, with the diminished capacity for empathy, and in a permanent state of excessive narcissism. They are stuck in an emotional and cognitive state of adolescence without any functional self-work having been constructed or conducted. This egocentrism is allowed to flourish by not encouraging and actually actively discouraging, as in the case of institutions such as Evergreen, in its lack of standards and grades, any growth of the sense of the self, be it defined through performance of identity through a looking glass self, be it defined through social negotiation, or any other function of self-formation. There is no need to discover the self, to work, or to fail. They are being handed a sense of the self, an oppressed sense of self, all while engaging in this massive ego trip, wherein the only individual sense of the self is the infallible protagonist. As such, it is no surprise, to me at least, that these students are instead choosing only to revolt, to throw a temper tantrum, demanding that someone do something, they know not what, while diminishing the value of their own degrees, had they had any value intrinsically. What they are essentially doing is burning their degree as they burn their school and they burn the faculty, ensuring a life of perpetual intellectual adolescence marked by nothing beyond welfare checks and food stamps, with their own worthless black studies and women's studies degrees. This, friends, is the state of Evergreen and the state of the average incoming Evergreen student. Even while a legitimate biology pedagogue such as Brett Weinstein desperately attempts to prepare them, in his own words, with a scientific toolkit for the complexities of life, but these students are not only not developing this toolkit, and I like that phrase, by the way, Brett, I'd steal it from you, but I'm afraid you'd charge me a few shekels. They are in fact actually being taught the opposite. That is, the very way of thinking scientifically is anathema to their existence, which they perceive as oppressive because it is only under this anti-science, postmodern framework that their social identity, their non-internal sense of self, in utter obliviousness to the way the actual world works, can exist. The question then becomes, why are these students who know nothing of themselves and certainly nothing of the real world so intent on these displays of violence and outrage? Well, part of the explication comes from the realm of research on social identity theory. Social identity theory, which I have mentioned many times, I'm now going to actually go through and give you guys the citations for. Social identity theory defines the self by the internalized membership in multiple social groups. See Tajfel and Turner, 1986, Turner and Oakes, 1986. Social identity theory is, quote, part of an individual's self-concept which derives from his knowledge of his group membership of a social group or groups, together with the emotional significance attached to that membership. That is a quote directly from Tajfel, 1974, page 69. In the context of social identity, the sense of self is derived as a product of membership in various social groups, and in opposition to outgroup membership. The social self is constructed as a, quote, emergent group process, wherein group identity is internalized as a part of an individual's entire perception of the self. See Turner, Oakes, Haslam, and McGarty, 1994, page 461. An individual can possess multiple social identities based on the different social groups he or she perceives self-membership. From the framework of social identity, the self is a construction based on various groups in which individuals perceive themselves as members. Evergreen and the surrounding student organizations with excessive pervasive and longitudinal exposure to communist and Marxist rhetoric, being taught not only through the faculty, as it is across universities, also creates a social environment where social identification as an oppressed class is reinforced through socialization with peers. That means that these students may perceive themselves more or less as members of groups, specifically as an oppressed group class, than they do as individuals. The obsession with the student population of maintaining this narrative of so-called white supremacy emanated from a fucking Jew is overwhelmingly evident that what this group is engaging in is what is referred to as minimal group identification. That is, I wear my badge and I am one of you with no other requirement to be part of your social group. They're attempting to turn something as complex, convoluted, and complex as race into a simple check mark on a box, to turn race in all its novelties and incomprehensible differentiations into a simple minimal group identification that is nothing short of racism from every single quantifiable perspective. No wonder then that they cannot understand Dr. Weinstein's argument about why it is inappropriate to have a day wherein whites are not allowed on campus. All they see is that your skin color isn't verified. This warped perspective on race originates as much from postmodern theory as it does internally, meaning that I think they would probably be about half as shitty of people had they never been taught this garbage dug out of the critical cultural landfill. They would still have such a weak understanding because of their childlike status, their missed opportunity to grow out of their permanent adolescence and reinvigorate their sense of empathy. That is because they have never been able to work on a sense of self through trial and error. Instead, what we are seeing is an adoption of the social identity on group association in place of, not in addition to, but in place of the personal identity. While we all hold social identities, the salience of which can be fluid, altering in intensity of association based on any number of variables, a normal mature adult holds a personal identity with a series of social identity satellites that, while they inform that personal identity, rarely do not supersede it. This is common among adolescents, however, in the stage I have described. Think about how teenagers often define the self with group affiliation. This is a normal part of development. For example, jock, goth, prep, whatever. As you exit that stage of adolescent egocentrism and adolescent cognitive development, through self-work, you cease to define the self through this lens of social identity exclusively. These children have not, and likely never will, do that. All they see is your social category, and all they perceive as their sense of self is social group membership. Now, why the fresh fuck did I just talk about individual identity and then move directly into intergroup identity? Well, it's because both are required to understand the students at Evergreen. By that I mean my analysis of the Evergreen students is twofold. On one hand, you have students who truly have been indoctrinated to believe, based on the pervasive cultural Marxism being taught in many of these programs as doctrine, as well as the level of professor-student relationship formed through Evergreen's unique system, that they are truly oppressed. And secondly, that the majority of these young adults are intellectual brainlets whose social and academic acumen are limited to government-mandated affirmative action, essentially, through No Child Left Behind-esque policies in high schools and subsequently expectations of limitless opportunities from that affirmative action and affirmative action-oriented self-loathing, as I have also described in one of my most recent videos, that is brought about through the expectation of the complete inculpability of a person of color towards their own academic success. In short, the education system these students come from before entering Evergreen does not induce a rigorous or really any concept of personal accountability or responsibility, considering their method of evaluation into students being pushed through a system through which affirmative action and No Child Left Behind is active. Thereon, entering Evergreen, a university with no minimal standards of acceptance, they are again able to avoid responsibility for their work and actions as they participate in these pointless and wasteful critical cultural and postmodernistic programs that require little to no work and again allow students to avoid personal responsibility without the standardized grading system. This is all then compounded by the narratives of oppression and victimhood being taught in these programs in tandem with outside influences from Marxist student organizations such as what Dr. Weinstein described in his interview with Joe Rogan.
The students, however, I believe, have become tools of something that they don't really understand.
Tools of what, though? Of their own making? I mean, is it an ideology outside of the school that they subscribe to, or is it their own? I mean, what is it?
Well, I believe it is a militant belief structure, and I do think, based on what we've seen on our campus, it is emanating from a subset of the black population.
Evergreen, for all its attempts to be inclusive and progressive as a type of academic social experiment, has come to a head in the result of this experiment. And the result of this experiment is being played out in front of us on Evergreen's campus. Dozens of students who have no concept of personal responsibility nor accountability, who are mentally childlike egomaniacs, who have been systematically indoctrinated into a belief system, coming from both postmodern cultural Marxist professors, with the administration growing increasingly affected by these ideologies, instituting diversity hire only regulation, for example, and from Marxist groups which have not only been allowed to distribute propaganda material on campus, but who appear to have been supported by the university itself on some level. Yes, this is the perfect storm to create these adult children who cannot process the concept of empathy because they have never truly worked for anything, nor have they faced any true diversity for all their bitching about that very concept, all while being armed with the unquestionable social Longinus spear that is to simply claim oppression to get anything they want, be it a power adapter or an education or the fucking eradication of an entire race of people. Everything is centered on the self. Nothing must be earned, and everyone must be constantly paying attention to them. This is why I call them functional toddlers, because that is the mentality of a 2-year-old, and that is what the system has produced. Adults with the mentality of 2-year-olds. Some of what I perceive to be happening here at Evergreen is a result of the unique type of pedagogy they are engaged in, which is highly familial and encourages, in some sense, faculty worship. Of course, that is not what we were seeing with Dr. Weinstein, but when I analyze how the courses are taught and how the students are evaluated, well, I can see how such a thing is possible. As I've said, Evergreen has a unique full-time program wherein one professor works individually with a group of students over the course of a year, constructing a course around the unique set of students within. This is a very interesting idea that I believe could be extremely effective from a pedagogical stance, in that it ensures students receive unique forms of attention. I would in theory love the opportunity to teach a group of students for a year in an intensive program as such, and while people like myself and Dr. Weinstein seem to see the value and virtue in this educational experiment, let's get real. Not all teachers are going to be as interested in utilizing this method for pure pedagogical purposes, but rather, apparently, as a method to take in these adult children in an almost parent-like relationship and thoroughly indoctrinate them with cultural Marxist thought. I say this because several professors have signed a petition agreeing with the students' behavior and condemning Weinstein. I cannot help but believe that given the very intimate nature and environment that exists in Evergreen's full-time programs, these students likely come to trust their professors implicitly. And if these professors are supporting this type of cultural Marxism and anti-white narrative and anti-science narrative, it is no wonder that these same sentiments are being shared by their students. I found this blog post from a former student written in 2011 who said as much himself, stating not only is it essentially required for students and faculty to form a close relationship at the potential cost of credits to the student for failure to do so, but that the college is overwhelmingly inundated with communist and Marxist rhetoric. Given that these students, fresh out of high school where they have been handheld and pushed along out the door, it is no surprise that not just students entering Evergreen with its open admissions expectations and lack of standardized measurements of success, but students across the country entering college programs are woefully ill-equipped to behave as adults as they have never been faced with challenges or independence. This is why many universities have miserable freshman retention rates, as first years party, drink, and blow off classes when mommy and daddy aren't around to tell them to do their homework. Evergreen's full-time program offers a unique solution to this problem by having professors work closely with students. Again, in theory, this is actually what I would consider to be an excellent solution at the university level to the stunted intellectual and emotional growth that categorizes most university freshmen coming out of the American public education system, in that it allows the faculty member to act as the surrogate parent to walk that student into adulthood. If this technique was being used to help more slowly introduce students to autonomy, that would be excellent. However, I fear instead, which is what is happening is not that, but rather that these adult children are simply being allowed to be fully and totally indoctrinated without even the same capacity for failure to slip through the cracks and get kicked out before they even have the chance to get the sieve of Marxist ideology shoved into their brain holes. And I think I have a good reason to believe that. Let's take a quick look at two faculty members at Evergreen who I'm sure were quick to support the students in their outrage, if not to directly spur and encourage this outrage to fully understand the types of colleagues Dr. Weinstein has at this prestigious institution.
So no, I don't want to hear about it. So what I'm saying is what I said at the start. You can go inside and you can listen to the students and what they're trying to say, or you can take your ass home. That is it. I gave you two options. I am not in the mood. I am so tired. You literally, the first thing you do is try to come up with a way to not listen. Two options. Go inside. Go home. That's it. I don't have time for anything else. I am too tired. This shit is literally going to kill me.
Do you have a time for an apology?
Go inside or
go home. Go inside or go home.
As a faculty of color, I need to address this issue. And I think you are taking a lot of space. First of all, as a minority of color, as a faculty member of color, you personally addressed and challenged me at my office door saying, why didn't we as a union protect you when we did our best to defend you and address your concerns, and yet you come to a faculty member of color and charge her for not protecting your needs. So I refuse to listen to you grandstand and co-opt this student meeting.
So instead, this program is providing a safe space to indoctrinate while in no threat of being kicked out or having your ideas questioned. And having to accidentally experience just a little bit of failure to ensure these students stay perpetually intellectually adolescent with no concept of personal responsibility, only demands for more things. Look at these adult children screaming at the president of the college that has coddled them this way. How they bully him harder than Trump apparently bullied poor little James Comey. Demanding he give. That's what they want. More of what? Wait, what do you want more of? Who knows? They certainly don't know because they've been taught only to spout this shit, not what it means. When I speak of the academy becoming substantive parents, what is this more reminiscent of then, my friends, than a teenager screaming at mommy for not getting them the best new iPhone for Christmas? Look at how afterwards they went and petitioned YouTube and various news outlets to remove this video, this factual video that recorded them acting like toddlers because it made them look bad. That is absolute childlike behavior. Reality must bend to my will because I am at the center of the universe, and I know that I am at the center of the universe because I have been taught that I am since the very beginning. They exist in this constant state of performance in front of the teenage psychological invisible audience. Nothing is ever their fault. They are infallible, and they are the star of a show in a world they perceive as a stage for them to exist upon. And of course then, it is no wonder that the icon of these types of cultural Marxists, of these mental toddlers, is the physical manifestation of the adolescent psychology, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Just as Clinton has blamed everyone from James Comey to the fucking DNC that rigged the damn primaries in her favor, nothing is ever her fault. Nothing is ever my fault. And I deserve anything and everything because I am the fucking protagonist of this play. So, my friends, I know this was long. I didn't intend it to be this long. I believe I have explained pretty much thoroughly the psychology of these functional toddlers and suggested where some of this indoctrination may be originating from, as it does in universities across the country, from the faculty, the institution, and in the case of Evergreen, the source of this insanity, however, does not stop there. No, not in the least. Now, the other day, I found a very interesting document shared by a former Evergreen student who, like many alumni of the institution, has expressed a great deal of affection for their alma mater. It is called a disorientation manual, and it is handed out to incoming freshmen at Evergreen by various student groups every year. And it is pure, distilled insanity. At some point during his interview with Rogan, Dr. Weinstein mentioned that he believed these raging toddlers he calls students were being influenced from some sort of outside force. And while I believe I have explained that certainly a large part of this cancer is coming internally from the college itself, the faculty and the administration, the education system in general, this is the outside organization or force I believe he was referring to. If you found yourself wondering what kind of ideas and narratives can create an entire university full of these adult children who want to physically remove white people? Well, seeing as I would not let you pay me to audit a course on postmodernism at Evergreen, this is precisely where that shit comes from. Now, as much as I would like to continue this video as long as fuck, and instead I want to devote an entire video to covering the disorientation manual. If you enjoyed this video, please look forward to the second half, which will be, I think, a little bit more fun, a little bit less academic, and maybe just a little bit more hilarious, because this shit is insane. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Aiden Paladin. Please look out for part 2 and Altana Volt.